Good afternoon, everyone, on my YouTube channel. This is Ernesto Fuentes speaking, and I am back with a new reviewed video. And I know I haven't been doing this for a very long time. It's been quite some time since my first episode, but this is actually going to be a more of a remake of an old video, which honestly, like, I was watching and it was not good. Like, I'm sorry. And this is on a Theater of Tragedy, so that video's uh, not. It's. I kind of made a mistake in making that video, um, but I'm gonna do it justice by reworking it a little bit and making it a review video, which is where I take a band or singer from any genre whatsoever, and I review and I listen to their entire discography and I review every single one of their albums in chronological order. So, so I'm gonna start with uh, with Theater of Tragedy. And now, for those of you guys who don't know, Theater of Tragedy is a gothic metal doom band uh, who kind of had a bit of an industrial sort of phase, like in the mid to late 90s, around there. Uh, and it was a very well-known group, and it's very well known for creating the Beauty and the Beast dynamic, which is where you take two singers, one of course being a female singer who sings very melodically, very beautiful, and you get a male singer who does like the death metal growls. Of course, that style became very popular in the European goth metal scene, most notably in Scandinavia and in countries like Norway, Sweden, Finland, and so on and so forth. And a lot of bands still do it to this very day. But I'm going to talk about one of the pioneers of that particular style, and that, of course, being Theater of Tragedy. So, so I'm going to start off with their first album, which is their self-titled album, Theater of Tragedy. This was a very good, it was a very solid first album, and normally I don't like to really crap on a band for their first album because debuts aren't exactly perfect, but these guys are one of the very rare few that just really hit it out of the park. I mean, wow, it kind of felt like going to what appeared to be a hybrid of like a classic Shakespearean play and a heavy metal concert. I mean, Raymond's vocals are just awesome. It just kind of really clicks, serves as like the sort of yin. It just complements Liv Christine's very beautiful vocals. Uh, they just really knocked that out of the park. I mean, it definitely sounds very classical, very, you know what I mean? So my rating for this album is definitely a 4 out of 5. Uh, it's great. It's a great album, and especially if you want to get into like classic goth metal, uh, I definitely recommend this album. That of course being Theater of Tragedy. So yeah, definitely, like, it gets a 4 out of 5. I think they just really knocked it out of the park on their debut. Most debuts aren't perfect, which is really why I try not to, again, crap on debuts, but this one it really phenomenal. Chef's kiss. Mwah. So yeah, highly recommend. Up next, we have Velvet Darkness They Fear. Now, this album, in my honest opinion, is just a little bit better. Mostly because it just sounds darker. Like, I don't know, like, something about this album just, it kind of made me it reminded me of this level in Castlevania Lament of Innocence. Yes, I am bringing up one of the PS2 Castlevanias. I'm sorry, but I just really like this one. Um, it kind of reminded me, like both albums, kind of back to back, reminded me a little bit of the Ghostly Theater level in terms of music. Uh, the the first album, Theater of Tragedy, just kind of had this sort of not exactly regality, but this sort of sophistication to it. You know, it kind of reminds me of like the main theme of that particular level. But this one it just had a much darker, more grim tone, which is what I loved. I loved this, you know, wholeheartedly, and it it reminded me of like that one area in the level in the Ghostly Theater level in Castlevania Lament of Innocence, where it just you kind of go into like the darker area of the theater. I think it's like on the second floor. I can't remember. It's been a while since I played this game, but it had that tone to it, and I just loved it. But one song in particular, I believe it's and When He Falleth, I think that's the name of the song, had this clip of Mask of the Red Death, I believe, uh, and it had a bit of Vincent Price's speech in that song, and it oh my god, that was just like that cherry on this perfect dark and evil Sunday. Like, I love this album. Like, if I had to pick between their debut and Velvet Darkness They Fear, I would just automatically grab Velvet Darkness They Fear. Like, this album, and this is just my opinion, personally, this gets a very enthusiastic 5 out of 5. You know, it's it's a little bit, like, in my opinion, it's a little better than their debut, but probably about this much. I don't know, like, I just prefer like the darker sound of this album. Don't get me wrong, the debut is amazing, but this one, something about it just really draws me to it, like a tractor beam, you know? Like, it's a great album. I just absolutely love it wholeheartedly. So this definitely gets a 5 out of 5 from me. All right, up next we have Aegis. I believe that's how it's pronounced, Aegis. This album felt a little lighter. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Lacuna Coil's type of sound, which is not bad. I think the album in general is great, especially considering that each song kind of tells a story of different mythological beings. Of course, it just starts off with Cassandra, which I just love. I love that sort of very clean sound. And funny enough, Raymond actually ditched the screaming and like the death metal growls and just went with a very sort of, it kind of sounds a little robotic to me, but I don't know, I guess it kind of fits. uh it doesn't really, well, not exactly robotic, but just kind of deep in a way, but not, I don't know, I just don't know how to describe it, but I just think it works for these songs. I mean, you got Cassandra, you got Venus, which is just amazingly beautiful. You get what's that other song? Siren, which is a great song. Lorelei. I don't know. Just this whole album, I think, is great. Uh, it definitely, for my rating for this album, is I would give it a 4 out of 5. a very a pretty enthusiastic 4 out of 5. It's different from their previous 2 albums, especially considering that they got rid of the screaming, which kind of toned it down a bit. But I think the fact that Raymond wasn't screaming and was just instead kind of doing this like deep singing, like it really just worked for this album. So yeah, and funny enough, this is actually gonna be the last of the sort of gothic kind of sound, because up next we have one album that a lot of the Theater of Tragedy diehards completely despise. And I'm, of course, talking about Musique. Now, this album is definitely a strange one, because this is where Theater of Tragedy just ditched the gothic doom sound that they were very well known for in favor of an industrial sort of future pop sound. And, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be honest, I kind of liked it. Like, it's different. I mean, it took me by surprise when I listened to these albums for the first time, especially considering that I went from the sort of dark and darkly elegant first 2 albums, and then the sort of Lacuna Coil-esque sound of Aegis. It's just kind of, it's kind of like it's kind of slowly but gradually changing. This is just my interpretation of this whole sequence. But with this, it was just this drastic turn. And, you get Raymond kind of sounding robotic in a few songs. I mean, most notably Machine, which is the album's opener. Yeah, like, I kind of liked it, although if I had to choose between the old Theater of Tragedy and like this particular industrial one, I would honestly just have to go with the old Theater of Tragedy. I don't know, like with a name like Theater of Tragedy, it just has this sort of gothic, very darkly sophisticated, like a vampiric masquerade theater type of vibe. It has that vibe. It does not sound like something industrial, like it didn't make sense. But musically, I kind of liked it. I'm not gonna crap on it. So my rating for this album is gonna be a 3.5 out of 5. It's not great, but it's not as terrible as people would actually make it out to be, especially the Theater of Tragedy purists, who would just crap on this album relentlessly. This and the next album, which I'm about to review, I mean, it's like, I look at them, I'm like, okay, guys, calm down. I mean, they just wanted to change their sound. There's nothing wrong with it, but I kind of do see where they're coming from, because, when you, like I said, when you think of the name Theater of Tragedy, you automatically think of, the very gothic, elegant, dark, like that, like a vampiric masquerade ball slash play that you're watching. Something very darkly elegant and sophisticated. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, Musique for me gets a 3.5 out of 5. And I mean, that's my rating for it. That's my honest to God rating for this album. All right, up next we have Assembly, which is actually Theater of Tragedy's very last album with Liv Christine before I don't know if it's that they kicked her out or that she quit. I think it might have been the former. This album is just kind of okay to me. It just kind of sounds a little more poppy, and it's like some songs are decent. Like I'm not gonna lie, "Automatic Lover" is a pretty decent song, and of course, "Let You Down" is a a pretty solid, fun type of song. And then of course you got "Motion," which is the last song off that album, which I honestly liked. You know, because it just kind of reminds me of like kind of cruising down the streets at midnight. Like when the lights are when the street lights are off, like down the city. It just kind of has that sort of like the dark side of the city type of vibe to it. But overall, this album is just it's just it's not my favorite album by Theater of Tragedy, but it's not. But I'm not gonna sit here and just completely crap on it. But it's just an album that I would probably listen to like a handful of times, but not consistently. So my rating for this album is a 3 out of 5. It's not terrible, but it's not that great either. It's just something I wouldn't really recommend. Like I personally thought Musique was probably about this much better. Um, but I mean, again, that's just me. All right, so up next we have Storm, which is the band's first album with Nell Zigland, who, in my opinion, is a great vocalist. And this is really Theater of Tragedy kind of going back to like the sort of Aegis sound, but just slightly more bombastic. Uh, it's a very beautiful album. I think it's a phenomenal. Like I think it's definitely a step up from Music. I mean, there's still some tiny little bits of elements in terms of like from the previous two albums. Uh, the only difference is that Raymond doesn't sound too robotic, but instead he's kind of like his vocals just sound kind of filtered, which it's not too bad. But but Nell Ziglin just, oh my god, she just really hit it out of the park on this one. And I think, in my honest opinion, like Storm is a massive step up from Assembly. So I mean, I love this album. I think this album is just very beautifully made. I think it is just amazing. It's like a work of it's just a great album for me to listen to. And I think like if I had to like I would automatically just listen to this way more than I would listen to Assembly. And hell, I would even listen to it a lot more than Musique. And I kind of liked Musique, but this album I think is just great. So this album for me, my rating for Storm is a 4 out of 5. Definitely a step up. It is just, it's very well made, very beautiful. You know, Nell again really knocked that out of the park. The instrumentation in this is just great. I love the addition of the pianos for a lot of the songs. Uh, the title track is just, it's amazing. It's definitely something I would listen to during a rainstorm because it fits. I think it's great, and I love. Oh my god, I cannot speak more on this album without me completely fanboying. But yeah, I love this album to the very core. All right, so up next we have "Forever Is the World." Then this is their very last album. It's Theater of Tragedy's very, very last album before their unfortunate breakup. Um, this one is kind of, it just has a much sadder tone to it. It's almost like, and I've said it before, it's almost like the band knew it was time to close the curtain, if you will. No pun intended here. Um, it's time for curtain call, basically. Um, and it just has a very somber tone. Like, I mean, Storm already kind of had a pretty sad tone, but I mean, it wasn't very sad, but it was just very beautiful tone. But this one, I don't know, like when I listen to it, it just tugs on my heartstrings in a way because it's like them saying goodbye. Um, I mean, it's kind of like if Velvet Darkness They Fear got really depressed. That's the best way I could sum it up. You know, it's kind of like Nell Ziglin's Theater of Tragedy is it's like a parallel version of the first two albums with Liv Christine. Of course, Storm is kind of it kind of has that vibe with the first album, with their self-titled debut, and then of course, Forever Is the World is just a much more depressed version of Velvet Darkness They Fear. It has this very somber tone, and it's like whenever I listen to it, I don't know, like part of me just wells up in tears. I start feeling sad, you know? Especially when I listen to the title track. That one just it's like a gut punch. Like Nell just oh my god, like her vocals on that song are just amazing. So I mean, I love this album. I think it's just depressingly beautiful. It's just the best way I could describe this album. So my rating for this album is again 4 out of 5. Um, I would just rank it just pairs well with Storm, and I think they just really hit it out of the park. You know, for being their last album. So yeah, like as far as gothic metal bands go, like especially in the European metal scene, I would honestly say that Theater of Tragedy are pioneers in their field. You know, I mean, sure, a lot of people would talk about bands like Nightwish and Epica and Within Temptation when it comes to, you know, female fronted goth metal, but they never really look at other bands like Theater of Tragedy and Elise, who I'm also going to be doing. Both of those bands, in my opinion, are just so overlooked, and it's just really sad. Like, seriously, guys, if you're looking for some good goth metal, highly recommend Theater of Tragedy. You know, definitely give their first two albums a spin because they are just elegantly beautiful. I mean, if you like a sort of Lacuna Coil-esque sound, uh, I would recommend listening to Aegis and the last two albums, Storm and Forever Is the World. You know, although Storm kind of has a little bit more of a Lacuna Coil-esque sound, whereas Forever Is the World, I just don't know how to describe that album other than just a depressed version of Velvet Darkness They Fear. So, yeah, definitely check this band out, guys. In my opinion, both Nell and Liv were just amazing singers for this band. And they still are. I mean, Liv is just still killing it out there. You know, I think recently she's even done a few shows with Raymond where they actually sing old Theater of Tragedy songs. And I would honestly die to just go and watch them perform together. Um, so yeah, man, definitely check this band out. Highly recommend them. So yeah, so this has been another episode of EBF Reviews. I am, of course, Ernesto Fuentes, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so. Hit that subscribe button, and definitely give this video a gander, you know. And if you once you have subscribed, you just hit that little bell notification so you'd be notified of more content from me. So this has been my second episode of EBF Reviews. You guys have a great day. Stay awesome, stay safe, and most of all, stay metal, baby. Cheers, guys.